Well, good morning. Today is Thursday, February the 26th, and we return for our daily Lenten reading of the book Bright Evening Star by Madeleine. We begin chapter 3 today, The Divine Interference. During the holidays, I was able to talk with my parents. I wasn't afraid that what I was learning in the world of science in any way contradicted the Bible. No, it opened it up. My father said that despite the constant quarreling between science and religion, the religious establishment tended to live in whatever universe the scientists showed them. For a long time it was planet-centered. The rest of the heavenly bodies reverently circled us. Having our planet home displaced as the center of the universe was a terrible blow to the church. But ultimately it had to be faced that we live on a little blue planet revolving around a middle-aged sun on the outskirts of one of billions of spiral galaxies. My parents had been married nearly 20 years before I was born, and so they had been through the crisis of evolution. And it didn't seem to have bothered them much. I couldn't see why having creation in a divine rather than a human timetable, how it was so terrifying. Didn't God make time? Why did Darwin's theory create such religious panic? Why would a threat to a theory be a threat to God? Did Darwin threaten the Bible or other literalisms? Does the Bible say that God's time and the earth's time are different? My father explained that his faith was not reasonable because it wasn't for reason, but for love that Jesus came. And whether God took a few days or a few billion to make the universe, it didn't matter very much. Why does it shake us up so when something new and seemingly contradictory is discovered? How can we go on believing that if that is true? Our understanding of God changes, and sometimes we forget that it is only our understanding that changes, not God. Too often we try to fit what we believe about God into what we believe about creation. For a long time the establishment tried to hold on to the omnipotent God who had created a predetermined universe where God was definitely a he, knew when a hen was going to cross the road, when someone in Greece was going to sneeze, when a snake was going to shed its skin, when Aunt Gwen in Maine was going to make apple jelly. God had written and completed the story. When it was believed that everything was already predetermined, from the beginning to the end, free will was more of an empty phrase than a challenging possibility. If God didn't know everything, then God had lost power. No, not lost power. Given power away in a loving act of grace. God is lavished with power, not grasping it, as we do, but joyfully giving it away. When God dared to make creatures with free will, God made us real instead of puppets manipulated. And God's love was made greater than ever. And here we have another magnificent paradox. Human free will and God's plan. God's loving plan for creation will ultimately be fulfilled. God's will and ours working together. How can we have both? God's plan and pattern and our free will. The only analogy that makes sense to me is the writing of a book. When I start a book, I know what I want to say, where I want to go, what my theme is. I think about my characters, what they are like inside and out. But as creator of a book, I give my characters free will. They surprise me by saying things I didn't expect them to say, rather than what I had planned for them to say. They are frequently far better or far worse than I thought they were going to be. Sometimes they make radical changes in the plot. But in the end, the book is far more mine than if I had insisted on knowing everything ahead of time, keeping control of every little action. So God does not lose control of the divine plan by giving us free will, or by coming as Jesus to show us what that free will is really like. When Calvin's misinterpreters talked about predestination, they took away any idea that we might be made in the image of God, for surely the Maker is free. I still shudder for the little children who lived in terror because they were afraid that they had already been damned to hell, even before they were born. What kind of a God would pre-damn or pre-save people? Was it something to do with divine omniscience? That there wasn't anything that God didn't already know? I believe that God knows all the possibilities, my editor said. Everything you or I could possibly decide or choose. Thus every way we would choose would be within God's knowledge. But it is not determined. That's a good way of putting it. Years later, my friend Lucy told me that when she was a child, she often lay in bed at night, trembling with fear in case the rapture came and her parents were taken, but she wasn't found worthy. Worthy? Who is worthy? What kind of frightening God measures the worth of a small child and finds it wanting and offers no grace? There are a lot of Calvinists on my family tree, but I am not a Calvinist, and Calvin's theology might be better expressed. And Calvin's theology might have been expressed very differently if he had known about Einstein's discoveries, or Heisenberg's indeterminacy principle, or the world of particle physics. The struggle to understand continues. How much are we predetermined by our DNA? How much free will do we have? Psychologists argue about nature and nurture, and they both play a part in our development. God giving us free will does not mean indifference or impotence. When I listened to my father cough and was helpless to relieve his pain, I knew that he was dying, and that his last few years in a drafty cottage on a beautiful beach far from any intellectual stimulation was darkly lonely. But I knew that God was not indifferent. When Father talked about God, he was looking at his own pain, his own mortality. The universe is so enormous and may be only one of many universes. How can we, insignificant, stiff-necked people, be a matter of divine concern? But we are. Alone on the dunes at night, I cried out in passion that we are. What else does the incarnation, the divine interference mean? Wherever there is love, there is Jesus. Known or unknown, named or not named. Are there planets where people have grown up loving God and creation and each other? Where religion binds people together instead of tearing them apart? Despite all our present knowledge, how little we know. Recent astronomical discoveries indicate that there are galaxies older than our universe. And since that's astronomically impossible, then the universe must be older than it is, or older than we think it is. And the Word which spoke the universe into being is older than it all, and no age at all, since the Word was before time and spoke time into being for us. Joy. Christ, in being born as Jesus, broke into time for us, so that time will never be the same again. My father understood that, even as he walked along the beach, breathing the damp, salty air, trying to find healing for his burnt lungs. Thank you for joining us today. I hope your day is full of blessings, and I look forward to seeing you again. Take care, and God bless.